She lost everything in a single night: her sister, her parents, her home. With her world shattered, she clings to her distant boyfriend, desperate for comfort. When he decides to travel to Sweden for a once-in-a-lifetime midsummer celebration, she follows, hoping to escape the pain and start fresh. But what seems like a bright, endless summer quickly twists into a nightmare. In this village, every smile hides a secret, every ritual demands a sacrifice, and the light of day only makes the horror impossible to escape. Danny, who had just returned home, suddenly received an email from her sister, but the content of the email was full of despair. Her sister suffered from bipolar disorder, which immediately made Danny feel terrified. She immediately called her parents, but no one answered. Her inner anxiety became stronger and stronger. She kept sending emails to her sister, but never received any response. After hesitating, Danny finally called her boyfriend Jerry. She always relied on Jerry out of habit. Danny fought back tears and asked what she should do. Jerry tried to comfort her, but Danny felt that this time, the situation might not be that simple. After hanging up, Danny called a friend. She didn't know how to continue getting along with Jerry. She was afraid that she had put too much pressure on her. Danny didn't want to be a burden to Jerry. In this relationship, their needs were not equal. Meanwhile, Jerry was also in a dilemma. His friends were urging him to end this torturous relationship as soon as possible. Just as Jerry was in great pain, Danny called again, but she heard her desperate cries on the other end of the line. Shortly after receiving the email, a strange caller brought Danny to her knees. It turned out that her sister had committed suicide after sending the email, using a pipe to connect to the car exhaust and end her life. The exhaust continued to fill the house, taking the lives of her parents as they slept. This blow was undoubtedly devastating to Danny. Overnight, she lost all her loved ones, and Jerry became her last resort. In the days that followed, Danny never recovered from the loss of her loved ones. Jerry stayed by her side, perhaps hoping to shake off his grief and cheer up as soon as possible. When Danny heard that Jerry was going to a class reunion, she offered to go with him. At the reunion, Danny received an invitation. Josie, a student in her major, had been planning a research trip to Europe for his project. So Mason, who was standing by, invited everyone to go to his hometown of Sweden, where a grand mid-autumn festival would be held in June. On the way back, the two were silent. Danny blamed Jerry for traveling alone without telling her and secretly booking tickets to Sweden. Actually, Gina didn't object to Jerry going to Sweden, but she just hoped he wouldn't hide it from her sometimes. Then everyone started planning their trip to Sweden. However, until this moment, Jerry was certain Danny wouldn't go to Sweden. Perhaps she was hesitant at first, but after seeing the beautiful photos of Mason's hometown, her heart was moved. She longed to escape the gloom and relax in an unfamiliar country. So she finally boarded a plane to Sweden. In this mysterious and remote land, exotic customs and folk customs filled the air. Everywhere was clear sunshine and lush green grass. The beautiful girls she saw on the roadside also confirmed Mason's statement. The girls here were fair-skinned, beautiful, and charming. During a break, Mason met his fellow villager. The villager had brought a couple to the celebration. After a brief greeting, the villager brought everyone a mysterious pill. Seeing Danny's concern, he specially made her a cup of tea, which everyone drank. Then they sat on the grass and basked in the beautiful sunshine. In northern Sweden, due to its location close to the Arctic Circle, the area experiences near-zero daylight every year during the planting season. The sun shines on the earth almost 24 hours a day. However, in this beautiful atmosphere, Danny suddenly felt unwell. She discovered that the back of her hand was covered in green grass. Clearly, the tea had begun to take effect. Danny quietly felt the breeze, trying to become one with nature. But suddenly, the images of her dead sister and parents flashed through her mind. She tried to calm herself and ran to the bathroom in the distance. But her sister's voice lingered in her mind. Danny rushed out of the bathroom and rushed into the dense woods. When she opened her eyes again, it was the next morning, 6 hours later. Her friends found her unconscious at the entrance of the woods. After a brief rest, they set off again. After crossing a dense forest, they finally arrived at Mason's hometown. The scene before them surprised Danny. It was a secluded and hidden village, surrounded by mountains, like a natural barrier, protecting this paradise. The villagers, dressed in white dresses, warmly welcomed the outsiders. Suddenly, a melody sounded from a distance, and the villagers began to gather in the center of the lawn. They followed the crowd to a platform, where a priestess in white held a torch. He declared it the brightest and hottest summer ever, then announced the official start of the Midsummer Festival. The villagers reveled in the festival, marking the beginning of the 9-day celebration. Suddenly, a long-haired girl emerged and locked eyes with the sturdy Jerry. At the girl's invitation, Jerry joined the dance. Mark and Josie, standing nearby, couldn't help but rush in. Mason suddenly produced a sketch for Danny as a birthday present. Before their departure, Danny had mentioned that their arrival date was her birthday, and Mason had remembered. This unexpected surprise touched Danny deeply. Later, while strolling around, they discovered a massive stone tablet covered in strange symbols. Not far away, a yellow pyramid-shaped building came into view. Mason explained that it was a temple, considered sacred by the villagers and forbidden to enter. They then saw a caged brown bear, but Mason didn't explain its purpose, simply saying it was the village pet. The couple stumbled upon some allusions depicting a love story. A man, after drinking a mysterious drink given to him by a woman, fell head over heels in love with her. Connie, however, paid little attention to the details. Meanwhile, Mason led the group to a house covered in beautiful painting, permeated with mystery. This would be their home. All young people under 36 would sleep here before moving into the workers' houses. Mason explained the villagers' view of life. They believed that life was like the 4 seasons. Before the age of 18, it was like spring, when everything revived. At some point between 18 and 36, they embarked on a pilgrimage. Between 36 and 54, they entered the working age, and between 54 and 72, they became mentors. When Danny curiously inquired about what would happen after 72, Mason gestured with his hand, but Gina took it as a joke and didn't press the issue. He then explained that they held a dance competition every midsummer, and the winner would be crowned the queen of dance and music. That evening, Mason told everyone to get some rest, because tomorrow they would attend a special cliff festival. Everyone was curious about the cliff festival. But Mason kept his secret, saying that the experience would reveal its secrets. The next day, a hearty breakfast was served in front of the yellow cottage, but the villagers were hesitant to eat. As the bell rang, 2 elderly men emerged from the nearby area. Only after they sat down did the villagers begin to eat. These 2 elderly men were clearly the centerpieces of today's celebration, and everyone's dining tables were arranged in the shape of mysterious runes. After finishing their drinks, the 2 elders were respectfully lifted up by the villagers and walked silently toward a cliff. Everyone stood at the foot, staring intently at them. The elderly men's hands were slashed with a dagger, and the blood was smeared on the stone tablet. The old woman then walked to the edge of the cliff, gestured toward the sky, and decisively jumped down, landing heavily on a large rock. This scene astonished the outsiders, and the couple was even more incredulous, questioning what was going on. But the villagers remained expressionless, as if they were accustomed to such scenes. Then the old man also walked to the edge of the cliff, but instead of falling to his death, he broke a leg. The villagers erupted in screams, as if they could sense the old man's pain. 4 men emerged from the crowd, one of them wielding a sledgehammer and brutally smashing the old man's head in. He then passed the hammer to the next man, and the 4 took turns swinging until the old man was completely killed. And, completely devastated by the couple, angrily vowed to leave. The priestess intervened, explaining that this was their village's custom. The 2 elders had completed their life cycles, a matter of honor for them. Their names would be inherited by the 2 newborn babies. Rather than endure pain and fear in old age, it was better to end it all early. However, seeing all this, Andy couldn't accept it. He hid aside and wept bitterly, determined to leave this horrible place. However, Jerry was deeply fascinated by this place, and even planned to use it as the subject of his thesis. Josie had a big argument with him because, after all, this was his original purpose for coming here. Jerry's behavior was clearly unkind, but the elders asked whether they would allow them to leave a written record. Danny had already returned to her residence to pack her luggage. At this time, Mason came in and wanted to persuade Danny not to leave. He told Danny that he was also an orphan and that the villagers here adopted him and gave him the warmth of home. He also said that this cliff street was just a custom of their village. He hoped that Danny would not have psychological pressure and try to integrate here. These words touched the softest part of Danny's heart. Under Mason's persuasion, she gradually let down her guard. Then Jerry also comforted her and said that although the cliff street looked shocking, it was also a unique culture. Perhaps in the eyes of these villagers, it was more cruel for them to send the elderly to a nursing home. The next morning, the girl Kay secretly put a letter engraved with runes under Jerry's bed. She didn't know that this action was severely watched by Josie, who had been pretending to be asleep. After dawn, the villagers gathered under the sacred book and buried the ashes of the dead old man here. At this time, Josie found Mason and told him about Kay's behavior last night. After listening, Mason explained that this was Kay's way of expressing her love to Jerry, and told Jerry about it. Finally, the elders agreed to their paper, as long as they didn't mention real places and names. The paper was also co-signed by Josie and Jerry. Just then, a middle-aged man ran towards the sacred book, cursing loudly, saying that Mark had dared to urinate on their sacred book and was blaspheming their ancestors. He wanted to kill Mark. Mason hurried to investigate. At this time, Mark was surrounded by villagers. Mason quickly rescued him from the angry villagers. Fortunately, others intervened and prevented the situation from getting any worse. Meanwhile, Anne returned to her house and packed her bags. They planned to leave this place immediately, but the villagers told her that her boyfriend was already with someone else and said they would pick him up later. Anne didn't believe her boyfriend would abandon her like this, so she left angrily with her luggage. Danny witnessed the whole scene. She wanted to talk to Jerry about it, but Jerry was completely immersed in his own home. Danny was full of doubts. She always felt that things were not as simple as they seemed. However, faced with Jerry's indifference and the villagers' silence, Danny was full of doubts. She felt powerless and could only silently observe everything around her. At lunch, Danny was still worried about Anne's disappear. At this time, the villagers nearby said that they had taken her to the train station and told them not to worry. Then a hair appeared in Jerry's bread, and the color of the drink was darker than that of the others. It turned out that Kay had secretly added a mysterious drink to his food as a token of love. Meanwhile, Mark was worried that he would be retaliated by the villagers for violating the divine power. Just as he was feeling uneasy, a girl suddenly appeared and invited him to see something. Obviously, Mark could not resist such an invitation, so he followed the girl away and never returned. Josie felt that there were too many mysteries hidden in the village and decided to explore secretly under the cover of night. Just as he was taking a picture of a book filled with mysterious characters, Mark suddenly walked in and looked at Josie motionlessly. At this moment, Josie was suddenly hit in the throat with a hammer. Mark slowly walked forward and revealed the face of a saint. Josie was killed on the spot. The next morning, neither Josie nor Mark appeared. At lunch, the elder suddenly announced that the holy book in the temple was lost and hinted that if someone returned it in time, he will not pursue responsibility. The elders suspect Jerry and Danny of being involved in this incident, but Jerry is eager to distance himself from it, believing that it was Josie and Mark who did it. Mason is then asked to find the two, while Jerry is led by a wise man to the priestess's house. At the women's invitation, Danny changes into a white dress, ready to participate in the May Queen's dance competition. She also drinks specially prepared flower tea before the competition. They form a circle under an elaborately decorated cross. Just as everyone is about to dance, Danny is horrified to find that her feet have suddenly turned into dry grass, which makes her very uneasy. Fortunately, as the music starts, Danny quickly puts aside all happily and immerses herself in it, as if she has completely integrated into the village. However, at this moment, Jerry experiences an unexpected change. He is taken to a room full of totems, and the priest asks him directly whether he is willing to marry Kay, not in the form of marriage, but just a one-night stand. Kay had already taken a fancy to her through the photo provided by Mason before Jerry arrived. Jerry is hesitant, perhaps because of uneasiness. Perhaps he could not face Danny, so he left the room without giving an answer. On the other side, the dance competition lasted for a long time, and the music kept changing. Some people were exhausted and withdrew from the competition, but Danny became more and more excited. It seemed that only at this moment did she forget all her unhappiness and danced purely for herself. In the end, Danny became the final winner with her quick reaction and amazing physical strength. Amidst everyone's blessings, Danny put on the exclusive wreath of May Queen and accepted everyone's congratulations. Mason even kissed her. They lifted Danny, who had not yet recovered, high up and sent her to the dining table in the singing. The banquet officially began. As a new dancer, Danny naturally sat in the main seat. She watched all this in disbelief. For the first time, she experienced the feeling of being the center of attention. It wasn't until she picked up the cutlery that everyone started to move. At this moment, Kay suddenly stood up and walked towards the temple behind her, her eyes fixed on Jerry. Then, according to tradition, the May Queen blessed the armor and livestock. Danny asked if Jerry could go with her, but the elders flatly refused. Then Danny raised the sacred fire and got on the float. Jerry watched Danny go away, unaware that his thoughts had become confused. The girl threw flower petals in front of Jerry. Under everyone's gaze, Jerry stiffened and stumbled towards Kay. At this time, Danny was performing a prayer ceremony, while Jerry, with a dazed look on his face, was changed into a new set of clothes. When he smelled the smoke injected by the old man, his mind and body became even more confused. As the temple door opened, Kay was seen lying naked among the flowers, completing the union ceremony with Jerry. At the same time, Danny, who had completed the blessing, was looking for Jerry everywhere, but was attracted by the shouting. Through the crack in the door, she saw a scene that made her feel heartbroken. At this moment, Jerry was betraying her. Danny could not bear this blow. With the help of her maid, she returned to her residence. She was suffering from an anxiety attack and cried bitterly. She even couldn't breathe at one point. The maid next to her also cried with sympathy. After finishing his work, Jerry hurried out, trying to find a place to hide quickly, but he found the missing people one after another. In addition to Josie, who was buried in the soil, Anne's death was even more bizarre. She was naked and tied. Her back was completely spread out, and even 2 pieces of fat were made into a pair of wings. Her eyes were replaced by flowers. Jerry saw this scene and wanted to escape, but turned around and fainted again. When she woke up again, he found himself paralyzed in a wheelchair, unable to speak or move. Surrounded by an orderly sacrificial scene, Kay now had delicate red lips painted on, which meant that the girl had entered maturity. But the purpose of this sacrificial activity made Jerry shudder. 9 people were to be sacrificed to the gods, 4 from the village and 4 from outside. Besides the murdered Josie and Mark, the couple were clearly among them. 2 other villagers had already been sacrificed, and 2 others had volunteered, their faces expressionless, as if this was a great honor. Mason had not only brought in new members, but also a new May Queen, who would receive a special award. But the most shocking part was that the final spot would be chosen by the May Queen herself. She was chosen by Jerry to be the 9th sacrifice. Jerry's eyes were filled with fear and despair. He stared at Danny, trying to plead for his life, but his words were unable to come. Danny's face was also filled with a complex expression. She had once considered Jerry her dearest love, but she no longer cared about him. Finally, Mason and the other villagers carried the offerings into the yellow hut. These varied offerings symbolized the village's reverence for nature and the gods. And finally, they purged their beast's body of all its internal organs and stuffed Jerry inside, attempting to purify their own worst evil thoughts through this powerful and terrifying beast. Jerry was the soul that carried all of this. The next moment, villagers holding torches entered the wooden house and ignited the haystack in the corner. The fire quickly spread. Meanwhile, the villagers outside the house went crazy, roaring and shouting as if celebrating this terrible sacrifice. May Queen Gina stood in the crowd, wearing a long dress covered with flowers, a stark contrast to the surrounding chaos. She looked at the burning temple with a meaningful smile on her face, as if she had completely integrated into this mysterious village and accepted everything here. And so the film ends. Midsommar is undoubtedly an extremely outstanding and unconventional film, and a masterpiece of horror with a calm narrative. It not only tells the story of the conflict between civilization and barbarism, but also reflects on today's so-called highly developed postmodern society. The village in the video is an ancient, uncivilized, closed tribe with a complete philosophical system to support their religious rituals.